I'll call to order the Finance and Safety Committee meeting of Wednesday, June 13, 2018. And the first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion? Moved by Councilman Vilhauer, second by Councilman Albertson. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Second item on the agenda is public comment, and this time is appropriate for anyone who wants to talk about something not on the agenda. Please come forward if that's the case. I don't see anybody, so we'll move on to item 3, approval of minutes from the May 16th and May 30th, 2018 meetings. Is there a motion? Moved by Councilman Albertson, second by Councilman Vilhauer. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item number 4 is report and recommendation of the Ice Rink Committee. And I see Vince Foley and Eric Scott, the co-chairs, are here, so I will let them give the presentation.
Okay. There we go. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. Back last summer when the mayor was elected, she asked Eric and I and several members of the community, including Councilman Roby, to serve on a committee to assess where we're at in the process of the ice arena. Examine it, work with what we had for the contractors or contracts, the architect and the construction manager, to come through the process to try to come up with the concept and costs that the options might involve. And as part of that process, what we did is we started with, I'll take you back historically, and what I'm pulling out is a drawing that Dave Todd had prepared back when I was on the committee, and I'm just starting with this as an illustration. This actually is the old arena, and there was a concept study done with a second building out by that arena. However, the council at the time and the mayor at the time made the decision to go in a different direction with the new two-sheeter out by the softball complex. So we came into this process after the council had made that decision, after the council had awarded the architectural bid with RSA Architects, and our charge was to examine what had occurred and to examine where we were at in the costs. And so we began that process of study. The packet of information that I've proposed or sent out, the first storyboard is a concept drawing of where we were at, or where the city was at when we started. And the idea was to have this two-sheeter with significant seating and locker rooms and spaces. We took this with our experience. Eric is a contractor. Adam Sullivan and myself have been in more hockey rinks than you can shake a stick at. We've probably been in every rink between the two of us, from St. Louis to Winnipeg. And I'm still going, so is Adam. And to use our knowledge and our experience to try to examine what we were doing. And so we took sheets 1 and 2, and frankly, 1 and 2 were kind of champagne tastes and had quite a bit in there. And so we stepped back and then moving to sheet 3, we examined what the concept was, because we knew just from the numbers that we had seen and what the expenses were, and just discussions with our general or our contract manager, Gray, that the prices were going to be much larger than contemplated. And so we stepped into this and took that 2017 concept and started, for the lack of a better term, whittling it away and trying to make sure that we didn't have fluff in the concept, and that we were using efficiently the square footage that the architect was presenting us with. And so when you look at 3, it shows, for example, that top green bar. It shows how that actually is a reduction. If you look in the dotted line below that, you could see there's that white dash. That's actually a hallway. All of that then to the right has been removed. And so we've downsized because, frankly, those spaces weren't needed. If you look through the spine area and you compare, perhaps it'd be easier going back to sheet 1, you can see there's a lot of square footage in there that isn't locker room space. I'm a Lions Club member, so I'll throw stones at us. There was a Lions Club storeroom in that spine that would be used once. I mean, it'd be used all year long to store, to pull stuff out once a year. And so we didn't think it was appropriate for that kind of space to be in there, so it got pulled out. And there was some other work that was done based upon experience to come up with the idea of a locker room only spine. Locker room, coach's room, and facility use. But then, make sure I'm on. So then, I'm sorry, then moving to sheet 4, this is where everything was boiled down to in the process. I'd note particularly this is the competition rink and this is the recreation rink. The competition rink, you'll notice that the seating is much smaller. Basically what we did is we downsized the seating just enough to allow for the Lions Club Ice Show, not to host the state high school hockey tournament, anything like that. We took those costs out just down to the minimum that a community use would require, not anything larger like the state tournament. We did some other reductions in downsizing, trying to take this concept down to as low a price tag as we could. When we did that, that included, if you'll turn to sheet 5, that there is nothing on the mezzanine level. Back on sheet 1, you'll notice there was a lot, or sheet 2, there was a lot of construction, suites, that type of thing in the mezzanine level. That's been pulled out. And so we basically downsized to this minimum configuration in order to try to drive the price down. And this sheet shows that mezzanine level and how it has been driven down. So,
just so I'm trying to understand this, Vince, if I'm looking at this, I don't know what sheet that is. 4 maybe?
Can I see which one you're looking? Point it towards me.
Above your thumb.
Okay.
Revised.
That would be sheet 4.
Okay, so does this go on top of that?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
And this, Mike that Mike was waving was sheet 5, that purple long bar. In the order of the sheets, it actually is backwards if you're looking at the building. Okay, so at that point then, we had the construction manager and the architect come up with a cost estimate of this, for lack of a better term, downsized concept. And that figure is in the ballpark of $10.5, $10.6, $10.8 million. Okay. Now, shifting gears a bit, there's been a lot of public discussion about the mall and the mall concept. As part of the study, we basically did an estimate of a similar configuration at the mall on the east end, the J.C. Penney end, and that was based on the mall owner's decision. And that price estimate came in right at about that same ballpark figure.
That would be the west end.
West end, yes. But that did not include land costs. It did include this demo, but it did not include land costs. We did have discussions with the mall ownership, and a few of you were part of a committee that considered their offer and sent an offer back to them. And at this point, it does not appear that there's going to be further discussions. The concepts, the financial concepts that we needed and what they thought should be involved don't match up, and frankly aren't close at this point. Now, if they come back, I'll certainly come back. But at this point, the mall process does not appear to be moving forward. That might change. Okay, so that takes us to the softball complex at 10.5. 10.6. I'm going to say 10.5 just for the sake of a nice, neat number. We don't have, the city does not have 10.5. And so we then said to the architect and the construction manager, okay, let's just talk about needs. And so that then turns you to 6. 6 is a bare 2-sheet barn. And when I say barn, that's not a prerogative. That's actually a hockey term. We say barn when we talk about rinks, so I didn't mean to sound pejorative. But this 6 boils it down, and probably the only added amenity is the left sheet, which is the recreation sheet, would be insulated for all year-round use. But it would not, but beyond that, the amenities are minimal. I've jokingly referred to this as 2 sheets, 4 locker rooms, and 2 outhouses. And everything is pulled out except for the 2 sheets and 4 locker rooms, and the locker rooms are spare as well. No bathrooms, no showers. Basically, it gets us to where we're at with locker rooms out at the existing facility, but gets us that second sheet. That estimate comes in at about $8.7 million. I've taken the liberty of including a paragraph with information supplied by Ms. Bobzine, which is the last paragraph, which shows the actual status of funds and inflow of funds. I think I portrayed it correctly, of where the city is at as far as finances goes. Okay. With that, my presentation of where we're at and how we got here is concluded, and I'd answer questions.
Vince, would you maybe describe what the committee went through when they shifted all the stuff on the top and the bottom, they shifted it to the left, and why you did that and how the future expansion is accounted for?
Thank you. That's a very good point. One of the things that we wanted to make sure that we contemplated, and I've turned to 5 because it's the best presentation of the lines. What we wanted to do was make sure that we did not build ourselves into a corner. And so we had the architect and the construction manager work towards moving the footprints of the auxiliary spaces and the mechanical spaces off away from either end of the competition rink, so that if at some point in the future we needed to expand, that was available. We would be able to add additional bays to the red steel structure.
So the stripped down model is completely able to handle all the way up to your revised drawing with extra money.
Thank you. That's a very good point. That was a driving consideration for us, is that as we took stuff out, we wanted to make sure that we left space for the future. There wouldn't be that much savings by shrinking the footprint in the steel. A big chunk of the expense is about $2.5 million for the ice compressor, the pipes, that type of part of the system. So we wanted to make sure, though, that we kept the building with as much elbow room as we could for the future. And so as we shrunk stuff down or pulled stuff out, we didn't remove the square footage underneath the roof.
Wow. Councilman Danforth?
A couple questions. First of all, a comment that you made, Vincent, I'm just going to refer back to the council on this. You said that the council had approved or directed to move away from any consideration of adding on to the current ice.
No. Well, if I said it that way, that's not what I meant. What the council did was say, go build the two-sheeter with the architectural plan that came from the committee at the time.
Do we know has there ever been an evaluation done to basically gut the existing one, use it as your rec sheet and add on? Do we know what that cost is? I've never heard it. Do we know what it is?
Yes and no. And by that, I don't mean to be disingenuous, but the 292 report that was generated by the architect's name is 292. It was a report that was started with Mayor Williams's backing, examined the concept of what we could do out there and not build ourselves into a corner. And that process included a study of using the existing building as a second sheet and replacing the piping and having a new compressor system put in. And that assessment was that our building had been very well maintained. It was a good structure and could be continued to be used as a ice arena. And then an additional construction put to the south. That, however, was not examined in the context of a minimum cost facility. It was pushed by the then superintendent, whose name was Dale Alexander, to make it gold-plated, and then we can always scale back. And so then it was a precast building with walking track and that type of stuff. So the cost estimates were not realistic on what it would take. But pulling bits and pieces out of that based upon my years of engineering experience, I can't pound a nail straight, the refurb cost of the existing rink with pipes, which would be 2.5 for both sheets, was it like $1 million? Sticks in my head. Yeah, but it was like $1 million attributed to locker rooms and the old building. So there, I don't have a total cost of what it would do to do this out there, but that's the length that that examination went.
Shouldn't we have an in-depth look at that? Because if we abandon that building, the city is going to have a refurb cost in that building anyway. We got to do something with it. So now, if our desire to use that building as a field house is part of this decision, then we need to know that, in my opinion. If that's what it is, then that obviously necessitates a whole new facility with two sheets of ice, right? But if we're looking at taking that building as a field house because we're building 2 sheets of ice, that's a different scenario. I think we need to take a very serious and detailed look at what it would take to gut that facility and add on to the facility and see where those numbers get us.
Well, that very well may be. That's not the charge of this committee. That's kicking the can down the road further on any further construction, because that study will take time, and then we'll need to decide. You will need to decide as the political body.
I would like to interject here and say we currently at our existing ice arena have a parking situation and a land availability situation for the use of that area right now without taking up land that's being used for other purposes at different times of the year for another sheet of ice. We're already maxed out for parking and places for people to, teams to gather and warm up for the ball time of year when we're not talking about arenas. Also, if we're looking at a facility that's able to host tournaments, which we clearly are, we're going to have a parking situation there when we have events at the Extension Center. We already have a parking situation when we have events at the event center, even without tournaments. And when you have a tournament which occurs on a weekend like they normally do, at the same time as the home show or the farm show, we have a no-win situation. There's absolutely no way we can do the parking there. There's no place to put it. And because every square inch is already used. I think we would want to do a straight face analysis there, which doesn't require a lot of calculation, just to see if that would meet our spatial needs, which my gut feeling is without an analysis that would not meet our space needs, where either of the other sites that are actively under consideration would. And that is the reason that the event center site was dropped out of consideration, because you couldn't have a wedding at the same time as a hockey tournament or an ice show. You couldn't do them at the same time, and they both occur on weekends, so that's a problem. And why analyze the cost of refurbishing if it's not going to meet your needs in other ways? That's just wasted time.
If you go back in time, we acquired the land for, I can't remember the name of the place that burned down. Sunchase. We acquired that with the intent of that being part of the expansion on the ice. Well, that was the justification.
And I was part of that.
Right. Yep. Right. And I know some of this land that's there, I think it's the counties. I think we could work something out in that whole deal. But,
But here's my challenge to you, Mr. Danforth. You're bringing this up. 2 years ago in the summer, in late July, the council voted 9-1. Councilman Roby was the sole dissenter to authorize the architectural contract to go forward on the 2-sheet complex. Are we going to go back 2 years now?
I will tell you that it was, from my understanding, it was to come up with concepts for 2 sheets of ice. Part of that was to include, because I had this discussion with Mayor Thorson, that we had a high suspicion at the time that we were not going to hit our budget. And without knowing what our costs are, to go to the current facility and see what a second sheet of ice is, and doing what we got to do to the current sheet, I don't think we're doing the public a very good service. I really don't.
Then, so 2 years ago, what was the vote for?
My impression was that it was to bring concepts to us, and that was both the addition of a sheet of ice and 2 sheets of ice.
I want to interject, and I think this is important. I was on the committee, and we researched some of these issues, one of them being, and it was a different architect firm before we got with RS. And we switched horses in the middle of the stream, for a better term, because there were cost issues we felt with the architect firm we were working with before. But I absolutely recall there was a study done by that firm. We'd have to look back and find out who they were, but there was a study done to see if it was beneficial, if we were better off going to 2 new sheets versus the refurb of the old facility. And it was plain and simple. It was way more expensive. It would have been a lot more difficult. Even with the acquisition of more parking, it still would have been a bad situation for us from a finance standpoint to refurb versus building new.
And that was the 292 report.
No, I believe I don't know that was 292, Vince, but this was a determination that was made by that firm. We'd have to look back, and I don't recall the name of that organization that we worked with. Somebody here's got to know who that was. But they did I think they did a pretty in-depth study of the costs for refurbing that. But it was an architecture firm that we were working with for a short time that did that. So we might be reinventing the wheel if we do that again. And I know things change over time, costs change over time. But I remember specifically that they said we'd be way better off cost-wise to build 2 new than
beat a dead
refurb.
horse. Councilman Roby?
Bruce, I'm trying to jog my memory. I just remember being in a meeting once with Mayor Thorson and him specifically saying it would cost more to refurb than it would to build new. I do remember him saying that. I don't know any numbers. I don't remember what the study was. I just specifically remember saying that come up in conversation one time.
Yeah, I was in the meeting. It was out at the Armory at that time when we discussed that.
Councilman Albertson?
I think going back to the 2 years ago, I think I'm right on line with Mike. I think the understanding was that we were going to see what it cost because we didn't know what it was going to cost. And to say that we didn't want to do an architect, I think would have not been the right thing. I don't recall the numbers being exorbitant to remodel. I've been one all along, as Vince knows. He hates to see me come because I've continued to say that with the old sheet of ice out there, that we must be able to remodel at so many dollars each year. I mean, it worked this year. It'll work next year. We're going to put money in the compressor, but it just seems like if we're at a money structure right now or function that we can't get beyond, and I don't know if we can get beyond it, but it just seems like 1 sheet of ice and then work on refurbishing that other one so we have that practice sheet. I mean, all along it seemed like we wanted to have the 2 sheets, and we were willing to do that. And Mayor, I don't know about the parking. I was out there for hockey last year. I don't really recall that all of the softball field parking was filled, and I just don't recall that. It just seemed like right around the rinks, you always had to walk a block, but after that, over in the, I don't know, it just seems like they weren't used. Anyway,
I'm not talking
I'm
about
just looking
hockey
for
at the same time as softball. I'm talking about softball, period, taking up space that they're currently using for warm-up and gathering of teams is going to create a hardship there. And then I'm just projecting what would happen if we built 2 sheets, taking up space that is now being used for parking, and then we have a tournament at the same time as an event at the extension center. That would be an issue.
Well, I'm
footprint
just looking for ways to move forward on this, and I don't know where this is, but I don't think it would be a bad thing, Vince. That you now have solid numbers, so I think that's really a strong thing for us to have. But it's moving forward now that I think is a real critical thing, because we've waited many years. I was on the school business, and many years our kids practiced at 10:30 at night, and I just want to move forward with this.
Well, I strongly recommend we try to find that information, because I absolutely recall that, and I was at that meeting, and
Okay.
I don't recall the name of the firm.
Sorry.
I recently looked at the 292 study, and I think that was done nearly 10 years ago. But and while Vince says, it wasn't apples to apples, right? Because they didn't have the exact same floor plan. But the recommendation that came out of that report was that it was kind of cost prohibitive or not the best use. Now, again, that was 10 years ago, and it maybe wasn't apples to apples. But the community is not everybody, but I hear a lot of complaints, and whenever I talk to anybody in the hockey association, nobody believes this is ever going to get done, because every time we get close, we kick the can backwards instead of kicking it forwards. And so, we do a study, a council and a mayor makes a decision and decides to move forward in one direction, and then if it doesn't happen during that term, then all of a sudden, the next council, and I appreciate you being, wanting to be prudent with the community's money, but it gets kicked backwards again, and then we spend more time studying and more time deciding. We need to pick a direction and charge down that path and do it. And I think that decision's been made in the past. I think it's great to have that information, but I don't think we're ever going to get anything done if we keep analyzing. I think the community has supported this. The community wants to see it done. The community has committed to investing funds in it, and some other projects got overspent and this didn't get done, and I understand that, and that's okay, and we have some beautiful facilities due to that. But I think we need to pick a direction and move forward and get something done. I think it's time, and I think we can get some support through sponsorships and naming rights and those things, but again, nobody really is taking this seriously right now, even because this is what I think has happened for 7, 8, 9, 10 years. The other thing that I'd say, and I'll say to anybody that listens, the important thing I think for the taxpayer and for the community is that we build a facility that's an asset to the community and not a white elephant. Can we refurbish what we have and add a second sheet of ice and do that for $3 million or the $5 million we have? Sure we can, but that's not going to bring any more money into our community. It's going to be adequate to have 2 sheets of ice and to make sure players don't have to practice at 5 and 6 in the morning. But it's not the type of facility that's going to attract your companies like Terex and those companies the Watertown Development Corporation is looking at bringing in. It's not a facility that's going to attract people to want to come to tournaments and people to want to sponsor naming rights. And yeah, sure, we can get by on the cheap, but I don't think that's an asset to the community. That's a white elephant that's just going to continue to cost the community more money every year.
And I think it's really good that we're talking about it. I think we need to hear that perspective and discuss it and consider, should we step back? Should we go back and reanalyze, freshen up? What should we do? And this is good discussion. Councilman Lullam.
I'd just like to point out that where the current ice arena is actually on county land. It's not on city-owned property. So, I mean, if this comes to fruition that the county doesn't want to do something, they have every right to say we're not renewing that lease agreement that's coming up. And that's not 50, 60 years down the road. That's coming up in the next few years. So, something that we need to look at is, can we get that agreement back in place for another 10 years, or can we do something where the city owns that? That would have to be something that have to be done. So, but currently as it sits, that's not on city-owned property. That's on county-owned property. So where Sunchase is and where the newer ball fields are at the Cook Complex, no, it's not. That is not owned by ours. So
True, Adam. I think
new ones are, that's
it
city
isn't
property.
coming up soon. Do you know, Kristen?
It's
2035.
Yeah, but it's not. I mean,
Okay.
a facility that you build
Right,
is
it's
not
not
a
the
10-year
lifetime
facility. It's
away. True.
Could I ask, Kristen, of these funds that you detailed, current cash available 4.5, how much of that is the bond funding? Ballpark?
Around 2.9 is what was left over in the bonds. I think when I gave an update at the end of, I think that was for the end of 2017, that's what was left. And then as we're getting some of the contributions coming in, that's what's increasing it.
But as to the bond funding, then when is that bond authorization and
When I spoke to the bond council in regards to where we're at currently, we would have to have 85% spent by October of 2020, which we're pretty close, pretty much right now. So that's kind of our number, our date that we would really need to know what we're going to proceed with.
Vince, I got a couple questions on your drawings here.
okay. Not my drawings, RSA's.
Well, the drawings you brought
I can't
forward.
draw a straight line.
Well, use a ruler. So you said there's no bathroom showers in those 4 locker rooms. Are they
Correct.
roughed in?
They're not roughed in. Oh, I see. But they're the initial piping would be laid.
Okay, so
That's as far as it goes.
at a later time there could be showers and bathrooms put into those.
Yes.
Okay. The 8.7 I got as a stripped down value for that. This is sheet 5, the last sheet.
Sheet 6.
Sheet 6. Now you had roughly 10.5 with the other items into that. Is that what I was understanding? So is it 1.8 to finish that, or is it going to be more than that if we? Because retrofitting is going
Eric
to
could
cost
probably
more.
speak to it better than I can, but Gray tells me that it will cost more to add it in later.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You can count on that. If we have the money, we got to do it now. And that's your point, right, Adam?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what
Eric,
it's going to
you
cost on top of the 1.8. You know, if we do it all versus, is it $4 million to? And that's a crazy
To
number,
do it
but
later
it
isn't
could.
the
Is it?
same as the difference that we've got between these two drawings.
Yes.
It's greater.
Is there seating involved on this? That
No.
sheet 5, there's no seating at all.
No seating.
Is it just concrete? Is that what it's going to be?
Concrete and gravel.
For sitting? They're sitting in gravel.
There's no seating. We stripped everything out except
The shell.
the shell. The shell, the locker rooms, to get that base price,
There's a roof
that's
not even
taken
the
out.
stairs.
Okay,
So
but
there's
now
not
to-
stairs, nothing in there.
No.
But now to go back to Eric's comment, you might as well just throw this one away because 8.7 doesn't mean anything to us.
No, it
Now
means
we
a
gotta-
lot because it gets us 2 sheets and kids skating at reasonable times. That's
Okay, now we're talking about a different thing, Vince, and I don't mean to
we're
be
not, Mike, we're
argumentative
not.
on this,
We're
but
not, but let me respond to your question. You asked, so we should throw that away. No, I don't think we should, because if we throw it away and take no further steps, we're going to lose the bond funding availability for this project. And then we are that further in the hole, that much further down the road. And so, am I recommending that we do this? No, I think that the city needs to do the greater price point, do more. My personal opinion. Ultimately, that's your decision. But what we wanted to do was give you this base if that's the direction that was chosen. We didn't want you to not know what the base costs were.
And it's adequate to build upon. And if someone stepped up and said, no, you're not building this without toilets, here's a donation for toilets, or seating, or whatever. Or you'd fundraise until you had enough to provide those. But you have the shell and the basic that you can build on.
We would propose, and this is a concept that we've used, is that if you'd go back to sheet 4, that you architect towards this concept and then alternate out stuff. And so have a list of alternates based upon where bids came in at, so that we could add
Right.
based upon pricing.
This would be our base bid. And then we'd have bathrooms, for instance, and stairs and seating. And those would each be a separate alternate that we could add in.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying?
Yes, and so that was the concept with 6, is it gives us that base from which we would build.
Until we bid it, these are all just guesses.
And to respond, I mean, this gives you, even if you do the stripped down version, first of all, I think you've got, if you're committed to building something, you've got some fundraising opportunity, and people are going to take you serious when you go out to do that. As well as now you've got a building and a structure and a facility that you can add to. and the key word here is add to without doing a lot of demolition, you have a facility, a structure that's adequate to add to and make the facility that will be the asset to the community. And I think you can get people behind that. You can get them to support that. So I think that's important. If I could ask a quick question of Kristen as well, just as I'm reading this bottom paragraph. The additional contribution from Prairie Lakes to the fund of 443 will move it to nearly $6 million. Now, is that the annual contribution that'll be coming in each year, or is that?
Yeah, I did it just for 18. That the $6 million would be what we would end 18 with. There's would be 2 more years, 19 and 20. Another 443,000, I think, for those 2 years. And basically, the reason I included those was because when Fund 504 was established, it was established to do the 3 projects, and obviously to build the wellness center took some, and then the contribution is going back to that, but it's really going back to the fund. So any contribution that's going in will go towards the ice complex project.
So if am I understanding that right, that in 2018 that would bump us to $6 million, but in 2019 to 6.5,
6 point, yeah.
In 2020 to 7. So with funds that are committed, that, I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say Prairie Lakes is going to follow through on those commitments. We have closer to 6.9 million.
Yep.
That we can budget for this project. That is, funds coming in, funds going out.
Yep.
And so now, this is the key here, right? Is there's a delta. We got to find a way to bridge the gap. We got to pick a direction. We got to go with it. We got to find a way to bridge the gap. And I'm willing to go out and use whatever resources I have to raise funds. I spoke to the Hockey Association, to some of the ice users, to try to get some idea of some level that we can commit to it. But I feel like if we can get the city to the 8.7 to get the stripped down version and come up with those funds to get there, then we can get it to the 10.5 to build the facility that this community wants and needs, and that's going to be an asset to the community. So, but it's time to pick a direction and go with it. And if you're going to say, if you want to say, and I think that's fair, if you say you feel it's a better idea to go back to the old rink and refurbish that, then yeah, we can probably get by with less money. I can tell you that without needing a $50,000 study, that we can get to 2 sheets there. But let's pick that direction and let's go with it. But we got to do something.
Eric, and I don't want you to take my comments any other way than I believe that in the past we've been said it's too expensive. That comes from an architect, comes from the previous mayor. It's too expensive. To me, the devil's in the detail. How do we know? That's all I'm asking for. Just show me the detail that gives me some idea of what it really costs. That's all I've asked. Mayor, when the week before you became sworn in, you and I met, and this is one of the things that we talked about. And I asked for it then, and that's a year ago.
And I think that's a fair request. And I mean no disrespect to you or to anybody. And I would expect you as a city councilman to ask those questions.
I mean, we get bids on things, and we quibble over $5,000, not knowing whether something's, and we ask for detail on bids.
When I first became mayor, I searched and searched for files and information and committee notes. There's nothing, and I found out that the committee was me and the architect, and no, that's when I appointed you guys who actually know about ice. I don't know about ice. I'm not the right person to lead that committee. I want it. I see that this is something that came out of our visioning process for our community, and I'm all about, 1, create a vision, and 2, go for it. Once you've created that vision, go for it. We should fulfill it. We should do everything that we can to fulfill our community's vision, and this is part of it. And I think it's good to talk about how we got here, and I know this committee has put blood, sweat, and tears to get to this point, and it's painful. These numbers are painful to even look at. It's so much higher than we were led to believe. And that creates an issue for us for financing. I agree with Mike. We need to know what the numbers are. We should know what it's going to cost for us to maintain this facility. And I'm going to reach out to people and ask them to provide me with those numbers as I'm preparing a recommended budget for the council to look at. I want this facility. I think that it will attract people to move here and come here and visit here and spend their money here. I think this is a good thing for our community, but we've got to know that we can afford it, and we need real numbers. And I think these are real numbers. I feel confident. I thank you for all of your efforts. I think what I'm hearing as a recommendation, and correct me if I'm wrong, you would like to recommend that the council budget 8.7 million, which is the bare bones. Was it 8.7?
Yes.
And you will try and find the rest, and we'll put that into our budget. And is that correct?
Yes.
And move forward. Take a step
find
forward.
The rest.
Yeah.
And I agree that fixing up the backyard version on somebody else's property maybe isn't the right way to present to our world. This is our Watertown. This is our community. This is us. We're great. Come. You know, we don't always have to have the bare bones nothing. We can up it a little bit. We want to improve our community. That's the purpose of a vision, right? Mm-hmm. Where are we going? What do we want? What do you want to say 20 years from now is awesome about Watertown? Is this ice arena in that?
Yeah.
I think it is.
Another interesting, just a sidebar or side note, but you know, I know the city recently heard a proposal from a youth sports consultant, but these types of facilities are what's going to replace the tax revenue that's going away because Herberger's and JCPenney's and those types of facilities aren't coming back. Now, if the finance committee would like to see some analysis, Julie at the CVB can help do that.
I think so.
But if you think about it, the tax revenue that this generates is at about 6%, or it's almost 3 times what you're going to generate on sales at Herberger's or JCPenney's.
You cannot buy this online.
Right, and you only have to generate $333,000 of revenue to replace $1 million in revenue at JCPenney's.
That's the kind of stuff we need to have in black and white for the council to make an informed decision, because this is going to be a tough one for them. It's a lot more money than we thought. Yeah. So keep that goal, that vision in mind, though, as you're voting. Somebody else wanted to say, was it you, Adam?
Just a couple quick comments. And I got a couple questions, if you could. But, you know, I've seen it in other facilities that we have built where we have not gone the way that we should. I mean, I picture the event center, which got dropped down and, you know, made smaller, and eventually it's probably not utilized to the point that it was originally intended to do. My concern is if we do not do some of these items, and I don't want something where we got gravel in their events, and I'm not. Don't take that wrong. I want something that people can utilize.
Nobody
and
wants that.
I mean, I think we have to figure out a way to do that, at least to the point where it's usable on both sides. We can host events in there, even if it's just people got to bring a chair.
Right.
I mean,
we've got a big enough space that we can put bleachers if we can afford them someday.
Right.
And that's the key.
And one of the things.
Can I respond
yes,
to that
please.
for a minute?
Yep.
My personal opinion is that the city should spend the money that is equivalent to a $12 to $13 million building, which the other 2 architects that were interviewed in conjunction with RSA suggested that we do, because it's better construction, it's long-term viability. We don't have that kind of money, so our group focused on this in the realities of what you are faced with in budget dollars and bond dollars.
Yeah. So the things I want to see that's something that can be utilized, or we can finish where it's a relatively easy finish. You know, maybe we have the concrete poured, we got the items ready, maybe the walls are up, but there's no interior finish, there's no plumbing fixtures, some things of that nature where we can slowly buy those, you know, or we fundraise for it. You know, Laverne is a perfect example where they built their facility, they sold squares on a board for their seating, and they sold squares on the board for their concrete. Can we do something along that? That's probably, more of the fundraising side. But that's what I would like to see. I don't want to put something out there that is not sufficient enough to host events.
So he's probably asking, okay,
I'd like to
take
see
away the gravel.
Yeah.
What is it, 9 million?
Yeah, what's
Toilets?
number
showers?
5?
Well,
Number 5, we know that was 10.5.
10.5 ballpark.
Okay, what's number 4 then?
Well, sheet 4.
What's this one?
Well, that's where you go back to the previous administration saying it was going to be 8.5, and it was.
That's obviously not going to happen. Period.
That was.
We can't get the bare bone for 8.7. We don't need to look at that. My question is, what is this facility built out of? Is it precast concrete similar to
Red steel.
It's all steel.
Yes.
Okay. So
Structural steel building. Yeah.
Okay. Will it have a girder type system built in the middle, similar to the older styles? I'm trying to picture what it's going to be like. Which facility it would be like? Is it like Marshall's?
That's a question for him.
Okay.
I think if you look at probably a little bit like the Larson,
Okay.
It's probably not quite as nice. You're not going to have as much mezzanine level upstairs, but if you're sitting in the rink looking around, looking up, it's going to be similar to that. If I recall, the Larson has or some hybrid between the Shields and the Larson.
Is
And
Larson
for the
Brookings?
guys that haven't been? Yeah,
Larson's
sorry.
Brookings. Yeah, if you're hockey
people that haven't been in there,
people.
these references mean nothing. So I apologize if you're feeling left out of the conversation here, but it'll be somewhere.
Okay.
Kind of somewhere in between the two of those.
Because Marshall's facility, if anyone had a chance to look at Marshall's, I believe they're a precast concrete.
They're precast concrete.
Is that more expensive?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah, I'm just kind of trying to picture this in my head without an exterior visual, what it would look like. Because that's the other thing I want to see is it's something that's appealing, not just a pole barn sitting out there type deal. I mean, if it has some decorative things to it, or we can add that. And I know that's down the road. I don't want to add any more cost than what we get on the inside.
Yeah.
But I'm always looking, what's aesthetically is it pleasing as well?
Councilman Vilhauer?
What are we being asked to do today necessarily?
Well,
It's just purely a report at this point.
it was a report, and our recommendation is these are your options.
Okay.
We naturally, as ICE people, would hope that you would choose the higher option and figure out how to fund it, recognizing that's not something
You
that's,
want us to move forward.
Yes.
Well, first of all, I want to commend the group for the effort that they have put in on this. I mean, I can't imagine. Obviously, I'm not any kind of engineer as far as where you even started something like this, but I really want to appreciate or commend the group for what they've done. Obviously, I'm concerned about the cost, but by the same token, I'd be very concerned about trying to refurb the existing facility. One, when we got land issues out there that don't own the land necessarily. Two, we've got potentially parking issues. And three, long term, we still have an old building, or at least part of it's going to be an old building that who knows what it's going to cost to refurbish. Maybe we'll save something initially, but I guess long term, I think that'd be a foolish use of our money. I don't remember exactly what we voted on a couple of years ago. I would have been part of that vote. I was always under the impression that we were looking at building a facility out the softball complex. That was my, maybe I'm wrong in that understanding at least, but that's what I thought we were looking at moving forward with at that time. If we move forward, and I'm all in favor of it, if we move forward with that facility out there, I don't want something that's an embarrassment to the community. When I start hearing about, gravel for seating area, and again, I'm not being critical of what you're saying, just making a point. Gravel for seating area, no bathroom facilities or very minimal bathroom facilities. To me, that's an embarrassment for the community. I remember when we started going to this, we were excited about the possibility of hosting state hockey tournaments, and I see that's totally off the table now based upon for sure the scaled down version that we've got. I mean, I'd like to see us, again, challenge ourselves. Let's analyze what the potential tax revenue could be from this. Secondly, and it's a segue into our next item on the agenda, you know, we haven't pursued yet what kind of sponsorship or naming rights opportunities we would have out there. That might close a good share of that gap. So I would really like to see us move forward, and not with just a very basic scale down. Again, let's challenge ourselves and have some vision for the community to move forward with this.
If I may speak, I don't know if I'm supposed to raise my hand, or I have a tendency to jump in, so I apologize if I'm not if I'm being rude, but I appreciate that, and I think that's kind of where we need to get to, and I think I don't know at what point. I'd like to know what more information you need and what we can analyze. Again, this is kind of falls outside of the scope of the committee that we're already on, but to get there, and I feel like if we can get to the point where we know the city will be comfortable spending up to $9 million, and we know we need an $11 million facility, but if we have the council's support to spend $9 million, I feel like we can get to 10.5 or 11 million, but we need nobody, even when I talk to people, I shouldn't say nobody, very few people take it seriously or want to put much thought or talk into it, because they just feel like it's not a reality. It's never going to happen. That's what I constantly hear, is it's never going to happen. Yeah. And if we can get, you know, some sort of commitment or some sort of favorable to spend X amount of dollars, then we know what we're up against, and we've got, you know, if you reach, you know, we'll get to this point. If you can get to this point, then we know what we got to do, and people will take us seriously.
I want to follow up on what Glenn and Eric said, and this was a conversation that the mayor and I had on our way in. She told me that, Vince, you have to come up with an operating budget on how this facility is going to work, and it makes sense. You know, that's something actually I had started 3 years ago with Terry Kelly, and now Terry doesn't know it yet, but he's back in charge. All right. But yeah, I had worked through the operation of the Larson Ice Arena with Pete. Can't remember Pete's last name in Brookings on costs, and then I was removed from the committee.
We need that kind of information to be able to budget this and to look at our long-term budget, because it's critical. This, to me, is economic development, and I know people will argue that point, that maybe this isn't economic development, but I think it is, and in that regard, I think it's important for us to follow our vision and do these things that will create the kind of town people want to come to, and ultimately it's up to the council if they will budget for it after we see those numbers and we can put it in our long-range plans. They can't commit to that right now without that, but they can express a willingness to say, this is what we're doing. We're moving forward. We're going to do, I would suggest a motion that would say we'll move forward with at least the bare bones and possibly more to be considered at budget time, but at a bare minimum with the 8.7, and try to get the rest of this going.
Mayor, I have one last thing. Are we going to get like elevations on this thing so we can see the various pictorials of what this thing looks like?
Yes. I mean, that we haven't.
And that's somewhat the detail that Adam was asking for as well. That and the operating budget.
We haven't. We've guardedly gave the architect assignments. we didn't tell them to go out based on the existing contract that they have to design this all the way out. We didn't. We wanted to shepherd that money. So we've only had them do the floor-based concepts. They do have the elevations and everything, I believe, already shot, but that type of side views and that type of stuff will be forthcoming once we have direction.
Vince, I would like to see some interior renderings if they could, with minimum next step up. And they don't have to be exact.
Sure.
I think, Eric, to your point, I think some of the reasons that we've had some reluctance from anyone to actually step up is because we don't have an actual plan in place, and we've never had anything other than a square. I mean, there's no drawing as to what it looks like. There's no interior rendering. You know, I mean, that's something that if you guys decide to do a recommendation for the or for the people looking to get advertisers, put their name in there. I mean, obviously that's something they would have to be able to do. Yeah. I know, and I remember when Brookings hosted their high school state, it brought over $1 million worth of revenue into Brookings in one weekend. So obviously there is money that comes with anytime you host a tournament.
We want to make sure, and that the idea is not that we're going to build it now, but we want to make sure we have that elbow room, because Brookings, for those of you who may not know, Brookings only built one side of their bleachers to begin with, and then later built the other side. Without that second side, they wouldn't be able to host the state tournament.
Right.
And so they built it in phases, and that's the same kind of concept we had, number one. Number two, you talk about advertisers. If you'd go to sheet 1 and you see how on the competition rink there is a lot of structure built on outside the rink on both ends, that was a big negative on the existing plan for advertisers and naming rights, and I know that firsthand because it took away expansion. Thus, the committee, if you go to 4, 5, and 6, you can see how that conflict was removed.
Okay.
And so keeping in mind that was part of the vision of the committee.
Thank you. Are we ready to make a motion here?
This is a motion for a recommendation.
Yes.
Is what it is?
Yes. And I'll put it in the budget and we'll debate it more once we have the recommended budget. If there's a favorable, if it's not favorable from the committee to move forward with this, I probably won't put it in the budget.
I would make the motion to move forward based upon the bare bones concept that we've got. Is that a sufficient motion?
That'd be the 8.7.
Right. With hopefully that's not part of the budget or not part of the motion, but hopefully that we can expand from that. But
that's a starting point.
As my motion, yeah.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries.
Could I ask one question, though, for the sake of direction now? What I would like to do is now take the committee to take the architect further, because you're already contracted, you've already signed the contract, but we've been not moving them forward to spend the money.
This is permission to move forward a little bit more. Councilman Vilhar.
I got a question before you. A prequel to that question, Vince, is okay. What does this come now before us as a full council? Because this is only 3 of us that voted on it. Will this come before us as a full council to discuss at a?
I think so. I
meeting?
mean, Monday night we have a meeting, and we can boil it way down and discuss it.
I'm a lawyer. You want me to boil it?
Paid by the word, right?
I did it in 1 page.
I'm impressed. Very good. I do sincerely appreciate how hard you've worked on this.
Well, the committee, and that they're listed, they've all put a lot of time in and bring a lot of expertise, and it's been fun. It's been fun.
Yeah, obviously we have a dedicated group of citizens within our community that really want to see this happen.
And thank all of you. I mean, you've given us some praise, but you guys don't get paid a lot for putting a lot into our community, and we appreciate that, and being responsible with the community's money and also wanting to move the community forward at the same time. So we appreciate your efforts.
Delicate balance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to item number 5, which is consideration of proposal for Great Plains sponsorships. And we talked about this last time, and we asked Ryan to give us a little bit more to go on, and he has. We have 3 options, I believe, options A, B, and C in the packet. And Glenn, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, well, why don't I, why don't I just throw, and again, this will come before the full council Monday night, but looks like we're losing members as time goes by. But I want to throw out some numbers here just to kind of put this in perspective. We've got 3 options. I had suggested, so far, I've never heard any conversation that says we didn't want to move forward with continued services by Ryan. I think the contacts he's made the last year that are going to start to come to fruition, nobody is questioning, including yourself, Mayor, I believe, that we should continue to move forward in some manner with Ryan. That being the case was an issue of how do we compensate him. And he's provided 3 options now. I had suggested option A last time, which we essentially tabled at the last council meeting. But I'd like to throw out some numbers as a comparison. Option A, if we just look at 3 months, and Ryan's expectation of a conservative was $350,000 of revenue to generate. Okay, looking at option A, that would cost us $25,000 for 3 months. If we look at option B, a combination of a monthly retainer and a commission, that same $350,000 would cost us $57,250. Option C, a pure commission based upon the $350,000 would cost us roughly $65,000. And another way that I looked at it is a break-even point with option B. If he would generate more than $92,000 is the break-even point. In other words, if he were to generate more than that, which I would surely hope he would be able to, definitely option B would cost more than option A. Looking at option C, the break-even point's about $135,000. In other words, anything more than $135,000, now the pure commission basis would definitely cost us more. So I'm back to where I was at the last committee meeting, at the council meeting, still suggesting option A, that we look at the 3-month. Now, if we're that concerned about the revenue that he's going to generate, I guess it probably, in other words, that's an argument for a commission type basis, then I guess we probably should have the conversation of, do we even want to continue to work with Ryan? I do. I trust what he can generate for us, even though this last year, I admit, was somewhat disappointing. But I still am back to suggesting that we look at option A for a 3-month period and then analyze it going forward after that.
Okay.
My comment is,
Go ahead.
I think he's done a lot of the groundwork on this, so a lot of the work's been done. He's steps 1 through 8 out of 10 on a lot of these. I think they're going to come through. I'd be okay with option A.
Dan?
I think the same thing, that he's got so much groundwork that he's had to go around and go through. He had quite a few hurdles to get past in Watertown, and so I think he's gotten past them. And I think now he's ready to move on, and he sounded pretty positive that he was going to land several things in this next quarter, and maybe even more. He's got some options now. There are new things open here for him to work on. So I really think, and conversation today talking about the hockey rink, it would not seem like we'd want to start over with somebody different. Like Glenn said, well, if we don't like Ryan, I don't think we don't like Ryan. I think it's just he had a time getting his footing, and now that he's got traction, I'd like to see him move forward.
Right. And although if we had a crystal ball and could see where we were or where we would be today, last year, we would have chosen pure commission because that would have been the best deal for us. But as a matter of personal pride, I think he's going to perform for us. I think he hates the thought of leaving here without performing in this quarter. So I don't disagree with you. I appreciate, Glenn, that you ran the numbers. That's interesting to see that, and I appreciate that you did that. That helps me. So we have
I'll make a motion, option A.
Okay. We have a motion by Councilman Roby for option A and a second by Councilman Albertson. Is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Glenn?
Mayor, I've got a question. I guess I'm going to direct it to you, Matt. Okay, we'll discuss this now at the council meeting Monday night. What do you need now or then to get this contractually squared away?
He's already given me the agreement,
Okay.
and so I have everything I need.
Okay, sounds good.
Yep.
All right, moving along. Is there any old business? Is there any new business? I would like to point out that the council committee meeting times are going to change starting with our next council meeting. This time period was, obviously we're losing people. This hasn't worked out very well for us, and pretty much everybody wanted to change. So we will be moving the committee meetings back to the day of the council meeting, starting at 4 o'clock. We will start with finance committee meeting all the time. And if there is no finance committee meeting, Public Works will be at 4:30. If there is a finance committee meeting, Public Works will follow immediately after the finance meeting. So that's what I have. Any other new business? No need for executive session, so I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Vilhauer, second by Albertson. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries.